In our headlines on this Tuesday, March 18th, here in Seoul. The Foreign Ministry says South Korea's inclusion in the lowest tier of the U.S. Energy Department's list of sensitive countries comes in light of security concerns and not foreign policy concerns. Meanwhile, South Korean automakers post double-digit growth in auto production, sales at home and shipments overseas in the month of February on year, according to the latest industry report by the Trade Ministry. And a rare phenomenon takes place here in Seoul, with heavy snowfall covering the capital city overnight in the middle of March, as authorities issue what is believed to be the latest ever snow advisory since data collection began in 1999. South Korea's designation as a sensitive country by the U.S. Energy Department reportedly comes in line with security concerns and not diplomacy. Our foreign affairs correspondent Panmunjom starts us off.
Concerns are rising after South Korea, a key U.S. ally, was recently added to the U.S. Energy Department's sensitive and other designated countries list, alongside North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran. While South Korea is in the lowest tier as other designated countries, it is the only U.S. ally with a formal defense treaty. Following communication with the U.S., Seoul's foreign ministry confirmed that South Korea's inclusion is due to security-related issues, rather than foreign policy concerns. The government also clarified that the U.S. has said the designation will not significantly impact joint energy research or technology cooperation. The ministry further highlighted that it's closely cooperating with the U.S., while noting that South Korea has been on the list in the past and was removed through similar diplomatic efforts. According to a report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, in 1996, South Korea was previously on the DOE sensitive country list from January 1993 to June 1996. But the report added that South Korea was a country no longer considered sensitive as of July 28, 1994. But despite the government's explanation, many experts still believe there are other reasons behind the matter. Because the U.S. list cites concerns over national security and nuclear proliferation, some observers in Seoul suggest it has to do with growing discussions on the need for South Korea to acquire its own nuclear weapons capability.
I think that's the biggest reason. The main reason why the U.S. Department of Energy would designate a specific country to its sensitive countries list is nuclear non-proliferation.
Others believe South Korea's domestic political situation may have influenced the move, since the U.S. decision made in January follows President Yoon's martial law declaration on December 3rd.
Once the Constitutional Court's decision on the impeachment is announced, the political turmoil in South Korea will be resolved. In that case, there would be no reason for the Trump administration to keep South Korea on this list.
Meanwhile, the acting U.S. ambassador to Seoul, Joseph Yoon, said on Tuesday that the Energy Department's listing was not a serious matter that could affect bilateral relations, adding that the matter was not a big deal. He explained that Seoul was put on the DOE list due to some mishandling of sensitive information that should not be taken out of laboratories, without further elaboration. Nonetheless, Seoul is looking to actively engage with Washington to resolve the issue before the designation takes effect on April 15th, with Trade Minister Andong set to visit the U.S. later this week to meet with his counterpart. Panmunjom, Arirang News.
On the local political front, the Constitutional Court held its first hearing on the impeachment of Justice Minister Park Sung-jae earlier on this Tuesday. Park was impeached by the Parliament last December, with opposition lawmakers accusing him of partaking in Korea's short-lived martial law by seeking to secure detention venues for key political figures. Park's defense team has dismissed the accusations as groundless. After a 2-hour session today, the bench decided it would begin deliberating on his case without a second hearing. Separately, the Constitutional Court has yet to disclose a date for its verdict to determine the fate of President Yoon Suk-yeol, whose impeachment trial ended in late February. Acting President Choi Sang-mok has vetoed an opposition-led bill that would make it mandatory for the Korea Communications Commission to have at least 3 commission members appointed in order to operate. The veto took place earlier on this Tuesday and marks Choi's 9th veto since taking on the role of acting president in late December. Currently, only 2 President Yoon Suk-yeol appointed members are active at the Commission, while the remaining 3 appointments to be made by the Parliament are vacant amid the political standoff. This parliamentary bill was also previously turned down by President Yoon Suk-yeol. Findings for the month of February show Korean automakers noted substantial annual growth in factory output, sales at home and shipments overseas. Our Moon Ji-young covers the latest data.
The South Korean auto industry remained strong in February, showing double-digit growth in production, exports and domestic sales compared to the same month last year. That's according to the latest automotive trends report released by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Tuesday, which showed the country's auto exports surpassed the $6 billion mark for the first time for any February, rising by 17.8% year-on-year. By export volume, the number of car shipments came to 233,000. The export growth in February is attributed to a base effect resulting from an increase in the number of working days, as February 2024 had fewer working days due to the Lunar New Year holiday falling in that month. Despite difficulties in the EV market, eco-friendly car exports experienced a year-on-year increase of 32%. While EV exports dipped by 2%, hybrid car exports surged by a remarkable 61.7%. In terms of domestic production, South Korean car makers produced 17.1% more vehicles, breaking the 350,000 mark for the first time since February 2014. Regarding domestic sales, 14.8% more vehicles were sold compared to the same period last year, totaling 133,000. Notably, EV sales increased by a whopping 298% year-on-year. The Ministry of Industry attributed this increase to a tax credit that has reduced the individual consumption tax on cars by 30% in the first half of the year, as well as the early implementation of EV subsidies announced in mid-January. With the new Trump administration proposing tariffs on automobiles starting next month, Seoul is taking steps to mitigate the impacts of these levies on the South Korean auto industry. The Trade Ministry announced it would form a dedicated task force to closely monitor the situation and gather opinions from domestic auto firms and would soon prepare a more detailed response plan. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
In other news, a snow advisory was issued overnight as capital Seoul saw heavy snowfall, a rare weather phenomenon in mid-March. Our An Sang-jin reports.
South Korea's spring seemed to have taken a hiatus. With unexpected heavy snowfall covering the country starting late Monday, Seoul issued its latest ever heavy snow advisory since 1999, when statistics first started to be compiled. The advisory was lifted around 10 a.m. on Tuesday in most of the capital and surrounding areas. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, heavy snow of more than 10 centimeters was observed overnight across the metropolitan area, including Gyeonggi-do Province, as well as parts in Gangwon-do and Chungcheong-do provinces up to Tuesday morning. Following the heavy snowfall, Seoul's lowest temperature also dropped to 0, but the feels-like temperature fell to sub-zero numbers. It's not common to see this much snow in March. The KMA noted that a low-pressure system formed by Arctic winds caused much of the heavy snow and strong gales. The unprecedented snow caused travel disruptions and safety concerns, with one subway line stopping services in the early hours of Tuesday, and more than 8 flights and around 90 passenger ships having their departures canceled or delayed. In the early hours of Tuesday, a driver died in a car crash, with police pointing to a slippery road from the snow as the cause. Though most of the snowfall is expected to stop by the end of the day, strong winds are expected to continue. The government pledged to monitor and promptly respond to any incidents to prevent further accidents. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The leaders of the U.S. and Russia poised to speak on the phone on Tuesday U.S. time amid hopes for a 30-day truce between Kyiv and the Kremlin to pause 3 years of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Our Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Monday that he plans to have a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday to discuss putting an end to the Ukraine war. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump announced the date of the planned phone call, adding that a lot of work has been done over the past weekend to bring ceasefire discussion into fruition. When asked if he thought Russia would agree to a 30-day ceasefire, Trump voiced optimism. Ahead of the planned phone call, the White House said Monday that a deal to finally put an end to more than 3 years of war is closer than it has ever been. Speaking to reporters, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt said that they're on the 10th yard line of peace, adding that they've never been closer to a peace deal than this moment. She stressed that Trump is determined to get the deal done. Meanwhile, the European Union warned Trump not to trust Russia ahead of his phone call with Putin. EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, said at a press conference following the EU foreign ministers' meetings in Brussels on Monday that the consensus among the member countries is that Russia cannot be fully trusted. Kallas pointed out that Russia did not immediately accept the 30-day ceasefire deal agreed upon by the U.S. and Ukraine, adding that Russia will use the opportunity to make demands. EU foreign ministers at the meeting also discussed providing Ukraine with a new military aid package worth over $43 billion. The EU believes that additional military aid is urgent for Ukraine's security, as Washington is pushing for a quick end-of-war agreement. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in a dramatic escalation of animosity, U.S. President Donald Trump has declared that any strike against the U.S. by Yemen's Houthi rebels will be considered a strike by Iran and that Iran would face dire consequences. Our Park Sung-jae covers his remarks and more.
U.S. President Donald Trump has warned Iran that it will be held responsible for any further attacks or retaliation by Yemen's Houthi rebels, long backed by Tehran. Calling the Houthis sinister mobsters and thugs, Trump posted on social media Monday that every shot fired by the rebels will be seen as being fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran, and that there will be dire consequences. The White House even reinforced Trump's stance, urging that Iran take the warnings seriously. Such threats came after the U.S. launched a new series of airstrikes over the weekend, which, according to the Houthi-run health ministry, targeted more than 30 Yemeni group sites and killed at least 53 people. The U.S. continued its attacks on Monday, targeting the Red Sea port city of Hodeidah and Al Jaf Governorate, north of the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. While the Pentagon said strikes will continue in the coming days, it added that will persist until the Houthis cease their attacks.
So the Houthis could stop this tomorrow if they said, we're going to stop shooting at your people. But they've clearly chosen not to do that.
Amid these warnings from the U.S., Iran's United Nations envoy, through a letter on Monday, told the UN Security Council that Trump and other U.S. officials had made reckless and provocative statements that leveled baseless accusations against Tehran. He also said that the U.S. had threatened the use of force against him, adding that Washington is seeking to unlawfully justify its acts of aggression and war crimes against Yemen. Park Sung-jae, Arirang News.
And in space news, the Blue Ghost spacecraft has become the first private lunar lander to successfully complete its mission. According to its U.S. company, Firefly Aerospace, on Monday, Blue Ghost transmitted some 120 gigabytes of data back to Earth upon landing on March 2nd, well beyond expectations. It also stands as the longest-running commercial lunar mission, operating for 14 days to break a number of records, including that for receiving the furthest GPS signal on the moon, adopting a vacuum to gather and sort lunar dust, and using a drill to gauge soil temperatures. Back on the local front, South Korea is preparing to resume its tour program to the border town of Panmunjom following a 16-month suspension, according to the Unification Ministry on this Tuesday. The related talks are underway with the UN command to ensure safe tours are starting next month. The resumption will begin with policy-related visitors before being expanded to the general public. The Panmunjom tour program was suspended in July 2023 after U.S. Army Private Travis King crossed into North Korea during his trip to the Joint Security Area. The program briefly resumed in November 2023 but was halted yet again a week later after the suspension of the September 19th Inter-Korean Military Agreement. The Culture Ministry has selected Andong City as South Korea's City of Culture for East Asian exchanges for the year 2026. Highlighting Andong's UNESCO-listed World Heritage sites such as the Houthi Folk Village, the ministry has pledged to support various cultural interactions. Since 2014, South Korea, China and Japan have selected 4 cities with rich history every year to promote cultural programs, including performances and exhibitions, under a trilateral initiative that aims to advance artistic collaboration. Art restoration plays a crucial part in safeguarding cultural heritage, and efforts between private and public sectors, as well as those across borders, go a long way to better protecting national treasures. Our Yoon-jin has details.
The Leum Museum of Art will be displaying 2 Korean artifacts from the 19th century following their restoration. The 8-panel screen titled Welcoming Banquet of the Governor of Pyongan illustrates the boat ride crossing the Taedong River and the banquet welcoming the newly appointed governor of Pyongan Province in 1826 during the Joseon Dynasty. Since 1927, this artifact has been housed in the Peabody Essex Museum in Massachusetts in the United States. There had been severe wear from leaving its homeland and over the passage of time, and the 8 panels were stored separately, making it difficult to even determine their exact sequence. It took over 16 months for its restoration.
There were parts of the painting missing, from small details to the entire bottom chunks. So we focused on how we could blend those parts without adding new brushstrokes.
Accompanying the folding screen is the hwarot, a traditional wedding robe worn by women during the Joseon era as early as the year 1392. With only about 50 versions of this garment surviving today, the hwarot was once reserved for royalty and aristocrats before becoming common among ordinary brides. It took experts in Dankook University roughly 13 months to restore the hwarot, including research on the fabric and dye of its material and embroidery techniques.
We stuck to a few rules. Don't harm the original form, remove the cause of the damages as much as possible, and contribute to adding to the beauty of the hwarot.
The 2 artifacts that have been restored with Korean technology belong to the Peabody Essex Museum in the United States, which has been buying Korean artifacts since the beginning of diplomatic relations between the 2 countries in the late 1800s. And in 2003, as part of the museum's expansion project, its new wing included a gallery devoted entirely to Korean arts.
We are accepting support from various organizations around the world for our conservation program. We had decided that the support needed for the preservation work of the Peabody Essex pieces would come from such programs.
So far, the Overseas Korean Cultural Heritage Foundation has supported 58 projects across 10 different countries, not only ensuring that the Korean cultural heritage overseas is preserved, but also displaying them to a global audience. But this is the first time that a private art museum has taken part in the restoration efforts as a contribution to society. After the special exhibition at Leum, the Peabody Essex Museum will showcase the 2 restored Korean objects in May. Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. The European Union and its international partners have pledged substantial financial aid to support Syria and its neighboring countries during a critical transition period following the ousting of its former leader. At a conference held in Brussels on Monday, donors committed approximately $6.3 billion in aid for Syria and its neighbors, with the EU pledging nearly $2.7 billion. This year's total pledges are lower than the $8.2 billion raised last year, partly due to reductions in the United States foreign aid budget. Meanwhile, Syria's interim government participated in the conference for the first time, with its foreign minister in attendance. Rwanda announced it officially cut diplomatic ties with Belgium on Monday, citing interference in regional matters. The Rwandan government announced that all Belgian diplomats must depart within 48 hours, raising concerns about escalating bilateral tensions. The decision follows accusations that Belgium has cited against Rwanda with regard to the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Rwanda insists that Belgium has taken sides in the regional conflict and continues to mobilize against Rwanda in various forums, employing what it describes as lies and manipulation to destabilize the region. Finally, in the United States, New York City celebrated its 264th annual St. Patrick's Day parade on Monday local time, attracting approximately 2 million spectators and featuring 150,000 marchers. Participants included school bands, Irish pipe and drum ensembles, and uniformed personnel from the police and fire departments. Mayor Eric Adams and Governor Kathy Hochul were among the attendees and also wore green for the occasion. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the annual tradition of dyeing the Chicago River green with an eco-friendly dye, a practice that began in 1962, was once again observed. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The cold snap is bringing heavy snow and gusty winds. The cold air from the Arctic came down to Korea, making the atmosphere unstable. The daytime temperature in Seoul is expected to be 7 degrees Celsius, and the wind will make it feel even colder. Meanwhile, heavy snow has been falling everywhere from last night. Most of this snow will stop tonight. Up to 20 centimeters or more is expected in the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province and between 10 to 20 centimeters in the northeastern mountainous areas of Gyeongsang-buk-do province, with 1 to 10 centimeters in other areas until tonight. Tomorrow morning will be just as cold as today, with Daejeon at -3 degrees and Chuncheon at -4 degrees. Highs will move up to 9 degrees in Daejeon, Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju. From tomorrow, the sky will become clear. Typical spring weather will make a return on Thursday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next, our daily panel session. And today we touch upon waste concerns in light of Global Recycling Day today.
아쿠아맨, 바다를 사랑하는 사나이. 바다는 내 영혼의 고향이자 안식처. 그런데 점점 바다가 심상치 않다. 아쿠아맨이 나서야겠다. 바다를 다시 바다답게 돌려놓자. 진정한 오션 마스터가 되는 그날까지. 주에 4번 정도 다이빙을 하는데 거의 뭐 제 안방이라고 생각하시면 되거든요. 근데 안방에 이제 쓰레기들이 가득 차 있으면 거기서 주무실 수 있습니까? 저는 못 잡니다, 거기. 그렇기 때문에 저는 이제 쓰레기를 줍어야 되겠다고 생각을 해서 이제 바다에서 쓰레기를 줍고 있거든요. 쉽게 말해서 일반적으로 밖에 있는 쓰레기들이 거진 다 물속에도 다 있다고 보시면 됩니다. 그러니까 예전보다 바다 환경이나 쓰레기가 너무 많다 보니까 사람들 인식 자체가 이제 쓰레기를 같이 주워오는 경우들이 많거든요. 그래서 예전보다는 훨씬 사람들이 인식이 많이 바뀐 것 같아요. 일단 캐릭터가 있잖아요. 아쿠아맨 복장을 하고 쓰레기를 줍고 다닌다. 폼 자체가 다르지 않습니까? 저는 거기에 대해서도 뭐 재미를 느끼는 것도 있지만 이제 쓰레기를 줍고 있다는 것도 같이 보여주는 그런 의도가 좀 많죠. 그런 활동을 한다는 거를 이제 조금 이제 사람들한테 이제 알렸으면 좋을 것 같아요. 알리면서 이래 하는데 같이 하지 않을래 이런 식으로 권유도 하고 그렇게 다이빙을 하면 괜찮을 것 같아요. 나는 바다를 온몸으로 사랑하는 그리너이다.
Today, that is March 18th, the world marks Global Recycling Day. And in light of this occasion, on Press Perspective today, we revisit the campaign against waste here and elsewhere to better protect our environment. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective. It's Tuesday, March 18th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Waste recycling returns to the center stage today as we celebrate Global Recycling Day. For more on this, I have Kelly Kasulis-Jo with the Washington Post here in the studio. Kelly, it's always great to have you here.
Happy to be here, thanks.
I also have freelance journalist Yang Chen-hao with us. Chen-hao, welcome back.
Hello, thanks for inviting me.
Right, Kelly, the OECD has been saying that less than 10% of the world's plastic is recycled. Let's start with that reality.
Yeah, it's not surprising. I think recycling has often been criticized by environmentalists as something that gets overinflated as a solution to our environmental and global warming issues that are going on. With that said, it's still important. The OECD report that you referenced says that 60 million metric tons of plastics were used in 2019, and that's basically double what was measured in the year 2000, so nearly 2 decades prior. Now, the question when we talk about that is often, are more plastics being used and recycled, or are more plastics being used and ended up in landfills or being incinerated and releasing, toxic chemicals into the environment? And unfortunately, it's the latter. The increase in plastic use is also causing an increase in waste, essentially. Only 9% of the plastic that we were talking about was recycled, about 20% was incinerated, and about 50% ended up in sanitary landfills, according to the OECD. And why is this important? When we create plastic waste, we're harming ecosystems and the environment. We are, reducing our availability of natural resources. We're threatening carbon emissions into our environment as global warming continues to be a serious issue. And as I mentioned, this debate is often spoken about in terms of personal responsibility. The age-old kind of argument of everyone remember to recycle. And I think that's important, but this debate is also, discussed in the sense of maybe corporations, industries, governments should also be held responsible for this kind of waste production.
All right, and staying with that, Kelly, what can you tell us about South Korea's recycling efforts?
Yeah, South Korea is actually a very interesting place as an American when it comes to recycling. Anecdotally speaking, in the U.S., I wouldn't say recycling is too common, and for those who do, they kind of just, clean up their plastics, throw them in a bag, and put them out on the curb. But in South Korea, recycling is a really organized, efficient, collective effort. And it's also kind of a dual story here. So South Korea is one of the highest consumers of single-use plastics in the world, which is definitely a very bad thing. It also has one of the highest recycling rates in the world. Just to give an anecdotal view, I've lived in apartment buildings as well as small, villa, 3-story apartments in South Korea. And I've really seen the country run the full gamut of people separating their own recycling, paper, plastic, glass, things like that, and taking it out, to having people who are actually paid salaries to manage people's recyclables. One apartment complex that I used to live in actually had a recycling center where you had to bring your recyclables, and there was a person, an attendant working there, cleaning everything up and organizing it. So there's a really big collective effort here. South Korea has a recycling and composting rate of about 60%, which is one of the highest rates in the world, according to the World Bank. And the average South Korean family produces about 1 kilogram of waste in their household per day. That's down significantly from the 1990s. So we're kind of talking about a country where single-use plastics are a big problem, and there's probably a collective habit that needs to change there for the sake of health and the environment. But at the same time, you really see a model for a government and a people that try to tackle this in a very efficient way.
Right. Jenna, as Kelly mentioned, Korea, it's a very heavy plastic consumer. What have been some of your experiences here?
I think it's not only heavy, it's extremely heavy, which has already caused several problems. For example, when you go shopping, many stores do provide plastic bags or even pack those merchandise for you in a very beautiful way, mostly using, in English is wrappers, right? Wrappers made by plastic materials. And there is one case that I want to point out. I think this should be noticed, that nowadays people do enjoy internet shopping, the online shopping, and they have those things delivered home. And Korea is one of them which heavily used delivering service. Meanwhile, as a user, I found that it's overpacked usually. And for example, they are mostly packed in paper boxes first, but then packed with plastic wrappers again. So if you open a plastic wrapper first, and then here comes the paper box, and you'll find out that, and inside the paper box, the thing is again packed by plastic again. And I believe like Kelly and me, we are both like heavy internet shopping like consumer. We use like services such as coupon or other like internet services. We've experienced this all the time. And I think for most of the people, after that, they've got what they want. They just throw those plastic wrappers, those bags into the garbage trunk. But indeed, the bags, the plastic bags, they had like recycling marks, so it should be recycled. But you can also see those bags, those plastic materials, those wrappers being thrown into garbage trunks instead of being classified into different recycling categories. And these are not single cases. This is the problem existing in our daily life. Both the consumers and the platforms and the stores should have paid more attention and try to deal with that, because people do shopping every day. If there are millions of people doing that every day and not knowing to recycle them, then we are producing hundreds of tons of plastics every day.
Right. Well, there is growing awareness about that, and hence there is also growing calls for more action with regard to such waste. Kelly, meanwhile, over in the U.S., I understand Mr. Trump signed an order reversing the U.S. back towards plastic straws. Tell us a bit more about the reason behind this order as well as the response to it.
Yeah, you know, following up to Chen Hao's point, here in South Korea, I think convenience, like delivery, instant gratification is kind of a part of the cultural mindset and almost the identity, the kind of Korea that the Korean government wants to show the rest of the world, that you could order something and have it delivered in a few hours and have it beautifully packaged. In that same sense, the plastic straw, and I mean literally the straw specifically, not other single-use plastics, has been kind of co-opted in the United States as a symbol of a few things. It's become a part of our cultural conversation. And so for, you know, people on the right or conservatives, it's kind of become a symbol of resistance, I think, to liberal values or maybe what is seen as excessive interventions by the government. So we've seen plastic straws being talked about on Fox News almost excessively. President Trump has also commented on plastic straws several times since 2020 and even on his original campaign run. And I think the idea is that this frivolous item that actually contributes a lot of waste and pollution to our environment hasn't had a good replacement. That's the argument, that paper straws dissolve, and it's kind of the symbol of over-regulation in their view. So Trump, for instance, has kind of sold his own plastic straws on the campaign trail. I think it was something like 10 for $15 or 15 for $10. And people were buying them more because of what they symbolized, and he would call paper straws liberal straws. So this item has been kind of taken out of the environmental debate and put into kind of a left versus right debate. In 2024, Biden essentially ordered that among government facilities and government offices, that single-use plastics like straws and cutlery should be phased out. This is something we see in several states and parts of Europe. It's a pretty standard way to kind of reduce waste. And Trump has essentially made an executive order to resist that. Again, probably not so much because of concerns over plastics, but what this straw seems to represent. You know, among environmentalists or people concerned with the environment and animal rights and the ecosystem, the plastic straw has oppositely become a symbol of, you know, our excessive use of plastics for kind of a meaningless level of convenience. So in 2015, if you remember, there was this viral video of someone pulling a plastic straw out of a turtle's nose, and this caused a lot of public outrage. We see this all the time with, I remember when I was young, those strips of plastic that would keep 6 packs of soda together. There would be a lot of talk about, you know, that harms fish, animals like dolphins and things like that, and there was a lot of public outrage. So I think, you know, the plastic straw is only one facet of this single-use plastics issue, but it's kind of become a big cultural talking point in the United States.
Right. Moving forward, but staying in the U.S., Kelly, I understand last September, the state of California sued ExxonMobil for decades of deception about plastic waste recycling. What's the latest on that front?
Yeah, California is one of the most progressive states in terms of acting on some of these environmental issues. And so in September of last year, and this is not something that's in my usual coverage area, but it's been widely reported about in the United States and also by the Washington Post. In September of last year, the state of California basically filed a lawsuit against ExxonMobil, saying that it deceived its customers or the public into the assumption that single-use plastics were being recycled or could be recycled, when in reality the majority of them end up being incinerated or in landfills at the detriment of the environment. And what this lawsuit was seeking was essentially money to rectify this issue as well as educate the public. So that was a couple months ago, and the latest update on it is in January. Basically, ExxonMobil responded by suing the California Attorney General as well as some rights groups for defamation, saying that this is part of a smear campaign against them. And for those who don't understand, why is ExxonMobil involved in this? Essentially because they create polymers that are used in a lot of these products.
Right. Chen Hao, back here in South Korea late last year, Busan played host to a UN conference on plastic pollution, but the talks ended with very little consensus. Are we expecting more negotiations this year?
I think it's going to be very, very difficult in the future because first, President Trump, who not only pays very less attention on environment protection, but also doesn't show any interest in international cooperation dealing with this, is back to office again now. President Trump, like Kelly just mentioned about the issue of straws, and he just signed an executive order making the United States be able to be back using the plastic straws again 1 or 2 days ago. And as you can see that, after President Trump retook office, he made the United States withdraw the Paris Agreement again and has declared the national energy emergency and tried to improve more extraction on petroleum and gas, deregulating many restrictions on development of natural resources. And in the name of American First, now President Trump is leading the United States, seeking more self-profits instead of playing the leading role of funding the cooperation on environmental protection and researching. And if we are talking about the negotiations, I think chaos and arguments will come next because inside the United States, the government is changing, but many NGOs and researching organizations might still want to somehow contribute or try to find more ways, better ways to solve the problem of plastic waste. But so for the United States domestically, there will be contradictions. And outside the United States, internationally, countries will need to deal with a new world, which the United States doesn't want to lead the cooperations anymore. And though then who are able to and who has the power to do so, substituting the United States, that will definitely become very difficult. Also, the situation in every country is different. Not only need to deal with those plastic producers, factories, but also to weigh or to measure their ability, because it might also cause contradiction to economy development. So it is indeed very complicated if we want to find a country or a union which can substitute the role of the United States on this. It needs to have enough power dealing domestically and internationally, handling the increasing pollution and making a fair deal, which most of the countries are willing to follow to improve the environment. It is extremely difficult.
Right, and against that very difficult situation, Chen Hao, experts have also spoken about a very close link between food waste and climate change. With that in mind, compulsory composting, I understand, has gone into effect in France as well as in New York City. Tell us more about that.
So since last year, France, the whole nation, and New York have both made organic recycling, organic waste recycling become mandatory since last year. I know for people in Korea or in Taiwan or in Japan, they might feel shocked when hearing this because we've already made this for such a long time. And now it is the first step for them, for France and New York City. Households and stores and other businesses will need to collect those organic wastes like peels, like scraps, and entity food, and place them into bins. And there will be organizations come and get and handle them professionally instead of mixing them with other garbages and throw them away. That means that food waste and organic waste will be able to be recycled and reused in other different ways, such as composts, or being transferred into renewable energy. But the problem is in France, nationally, no punishment will be imposed if people don't do so, do not cooperate. And also in New York, researcher has indicated that still it is lack of collection productivity. People are still not willing to do so. So in order to improve the situation, I think probably forcible regulations such as fines might be necessary. And indeed, pushing this kind of like organic waste recycling is always difficult and will be a very long journey, long progress in many countries. For example, in Taiwan, several NGOs has been advocating since the end of the 1980s. And the government has made it mandatory in 2003. But these 10 years in Taiwan, the recycling waste of organic waste is only around like 7 to 12%. So like organic waste are still charging like 30 to 40% among the general garbage and wastes. Still, in many places, there are not enough like containers, bins, or human resources dealing with this, and especially in rural areas. And those has made many residents throw them away along with garbage. Those lead to the low effectiveness collecting this kind of organic waste. And comparing to other kinds of garbages, organic waste do cause more serious problem than we originally think, since it always combined with like oil and salt and water, and when they are being put into the incinerator, it will generate dioxin, causing air pollution and the damage of the incinerator itself. So that's why recent years dealing with the problems of organic waste has become such an important issue, because all of us, we eat and we might like be unavoidably produce organic waste when making food every day.
Right, and as Chen-Hao mentioned, Kelly, Korea's food recycling campaign, it's been covered by the foreign media quite frequently. What do you care to highlight about Korea's campaign?
Yeah, I think the reason why the foreign media, particularly the Western media, is so fascinated with this is because, again, it's such an amazing example of a country going through great lengths to reduce waste in a way that you don't see in many other parts of the world. In fact, South Korea is one of the only countries that has a national food waste management system, which I think is worth noting. Where I grew up in the eastern United States, generally a liberal region, maybe recycled, like my family recycled, you would clean your plastics, you would take them out to the curb, and then you never knew what happened to them. Maybe if you wanted 5 cents for a glass bottle, you would drive to the supermarket and, you know, spend 2 hours of your life putting them in this machine one by one to get a couple of dollars, and you just threw your food in the regular trash and never really thought about it again. And actually you would kind of be in a rush to take out the trash every single day and not waste those bags because you didn't want the food to stink up your house, right? Meanwhile, here in South Korea, you know, I buy the government trash bag that is designated for food scraps specifically. I put the food scraps in there, I put it in my freezer so it doesn't smell, and when it's full, I take it out, and the government takes care of the rest. And so what we've seen is, you know, 20 years ago in South Korea, about 98% of food waste ended up buried in the ground, or waste essentially producing methane, which is a greenhouse gas released into the environment, polluting the soil, things like that. And in the last 20 years, it has actually turned around to 98% of food waste being taken care of properly, being composted, being turned into feed, things like that. And this is all according to a really great article that I really hope people check out by my colleagues Julie Yoon and Andrew Jung at the Post. It's a very visually forward article where they actually went down to the Daejeon Bioenergy Center and witnessed how this food waste is dealt with. And it's just a really fascinating story of just fantastic organization and collective effort. Just to give this some comparison, in the U.S., about 60% of food waste goes into landfills, which again is very bad in terms of polluting the environment, creating greenhouse gases. You know, it took me a couple of years to figure out the trick from other South Koreans of putting my food scraps in the freezer. But a lot of people do that. And just as an example, if you go to like the supermarket or like Korea's version of Walmart, not only can you buy a trash can and a recycling bin that separates paper, plastic, glass, things like that. You can actually get like a 3-section garbage bin for recyclables. But you can actually buy a special sealed bucket for food scraps so that they don't stink up your house. And I think that kind of shows, these products show how much of a mainstay these practices are in the South Korean home.
Right. Chen, beyond food waste and plastic waste, of course, what other forms of waste should we be concerned about? I remember during the pandemic having a separate trash can within the office for face masks.
Yeah, and another thing I want to point out is fabrics and leathers. Clothes and shoes is also another serious problem in South Korea that I really want to point out. If it was like 30 or 40 years ago, even not being regarded as luxuries, like clothes and shoes were relatively highly cost things. So people change their clothes or shoes once, maybe every 3 or 4 years. But recently, so-called like fast fashion, this kind of concept has become very popular, and it is more easier now for people to get clothes and new shoes at very lower prices. And thanks to the internet, they can do shopping whenever they want, and they can buy more. Stores, companies, designers, and platforms, they roll out the new kind of styles of items every day, trying to attract people, the netizens consume. But indeed, many cases, those who bought the clothes often don't wear all of them, or they just wear them for like 1 or 2 times, and then as time goes by, they throw them away. So in South Korea, I found that more than 800,000 tons of clothes and shoes waste come out every year, and they are combined with plastics and dye, so it will also cause like severe pollution if they are not being well recycled. South Korea as a country producing fabrics are not able to handle this kind of like clothes and shoes waste, and many of them, they are being exported, being dumped into like South Asian or African countries such as Bangladesh and Ghana, causing pollutions and health problems in other countries.
All right, so definitely something to think about, fashion and fast fashion. All right, that's all the time we have. Chen Hao, as always, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Kelly, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching.